Hello students, welcome to the subject of Programs for Rural and Urban Development. In this, the next lesson is the role of NGOs. Let us try to understand the role of NGOs in the development and also the support of PRUDPart to NGOs. A NGO, that is a non-governmental organization, is any non-profit voluntary citizens group which is organized on a local, national or international level. NGOs are voluntary organizations. They are democratic and open to all those wishing to become member of organization voluntarily and serve the society. Moreover, NGO is a legally constituted organization created by few people independently. Task oriented and driven by people with a common interest, NGOs perform a variety of service and humanitarian functions, bring citizen concerns to governments, advocate and monitor policies, and encourage political participation through provision of information. Some are organized around specific issues such as human rights, environment or health and education. They provide analysis and expertise, serve as early warning mechanisms and monitor and implement international agreements. NGOs have long history in India. In the beginning, these services were rendered by people motivated by their religious feelings. They believed that service to people would be service to God. Many people, including rulers, have trod the path of service to their fellow beings and adopted it as their life mission. The help and support used to be individual, spontaneous and transitory. It is around the late 18th and early 19th century that associations and organizations were being formed to render such activities in more organized and permanent profile. The reform movements of the 19th century were perhaps the first organized forms of voluntary action in the service of the society. During the second half of the 19th century, nationalist consciousness spread across India and self-help emerged as the primary focus of socio-political movements. Numerous organizations were established during this period, including Arya Samaj in 1875, the National Council for Women in India in 1875, and the Indian National Conference in 1887. VOs, that is voluntary organizations, were also formed under the influence of the ideals of Gandhiji. A few of them are Seva, Ekalavya, Disha, etc. A significant growth of NGOs started after India achieved independence. The number of NGOs increased in the time of 1960s as people felt that the government projects are inadequate to deal with the development of deprived sections of India. In 1980, the sixth five-year plan, during 1980 to 85, the government identified new areas in which NGOs as new actors could participate in development. They are optimal utilization and development of renewable source of energy, family welfare, health and nutrition, education, health for all programs, water management and soil conservation, social welfare programs for weaker sections, implementation of minimum needs program, disaster preparedness and management, that is for earthquakes, floods, cyclones, etc., promotion of ecology and tribal development, environmental protection and education. In the next 5-year plans, a greater emphasis has been laid on the role of voluntary organizations in rural development and poverty. International NGOs started around the year 1839. It has been estimated that there were 1083 NGOs by the year 1914. but the phrase non-government organizations only became popular when United Nations Organizations was established in the year 1945. The involvement of NGOs in social challenges has a great effect on developing countries. The more financial support and the more number of volunteers will greatly help in achieving the development goals. The objectives of NGOs include to create awareness on people's participation in developmental activities, to create an efficient local leadership among the deprived sections, to create socio-economic infrastructural facilities, to facilitate the process of expanding employment opportunities for people below the poverty line, to initiate innovative projects, undertaking training, research and publications, to organize national meets for discussing national issues and matters of mutual interest. A NGO should possess the features such as it must be registered under the Society Registration Act 1860. It must be based on a rural area and work at least for 4 to 5 years. It must have professional and managerial expertise to produce audit statements and reports for funds received from the government. It must not be linked directly or indirectly with any political party. It must declare that it will adopt only legal and non-violent needs of rural development purposes. It must implement anti-poverty, minimum needs and socio-economic development programs. NGOs have immense role in bringing about social change and development. Development is a multifaceted process which essentially involves the aggressive participation of the people that would not be possible unless they are educated, awakened and motivated. The role of NGO is to supplement government effort so as to offer the rural poor choices and alternatives. To help specific target group, example women, landless labor, etc. at the village level. To set an example, it should be possible for the voluntary agency to adopt simple, innovative, flexible and inexpensive resources to reach a large number with lesser overheads and with greater community participation. To activate the delivery system and to make it effective at the village level to respond to the felt needs of the poorest of the poor. To disseminate information and to impart certain skills through training to supplement the income of the target group. To popularize social activities for improving the quality of life of the disadvantaged groups and make communities as self-reliant as possible. To show how indigenous resources could be used for their own development. To popularize appropriate technology by improving indigenous machines, tools and demonstrating their superiority and bring it in a simpler form to the rural poor. To train a cadre of grassroots workers who believe in professionalizing volunteerism. To mobilize financial resources from within the community with a view to making communities stand on their own feet. To promote education, particularly who have remained unbenefited or less benefited by the measures adopted by the government. The education of girls and particularly the SCs and STs has been their target objective. To restore the dignity of the deprived and discriminated sections of the people in the society like women suffering from gender discrimination, low caste people suffering from caste segregation and racial and religious discriminations. To mobilize and organize large-scale food distribution during massive famines for malnourished population. NGOs receive support from different ministries and government departments to carry out different activities. The support will be either financial or coordination. Some of the schemes of various ministries where NGOs are made partners for implementation of the activities are: first is Ministry of Culture. This provides assistance for preservation and development of cultural heritage of Himalayas, financial assistance for preservation and development of Buddhist or Tibetan culture and art, financial assistance for professional groups and individuals for specified performing art projects, that is salary grant and production grant, promotion and strengthening of regional and local museums, scheme for building grant to cultural organizations, scheme for financial assistance for research support to voluntary organization engaged in cultural activities, that is literary, visual and performing arts. Second is Ministry of Tribal Affairs. This helps to provide award of special incentives ASI to NGOs for improvement of infrastructure. Also provides coaching for scheduled tribes, development of primitive tribal groups, grant in aid to voluntary organizations working for the welfare of scheduled tribes, schemes of strengthening education among ST girls in low districts. Next ministry is Ministry of Women and Child Development. General grant in aid scheme for assistance to voluntary organizations in the field of women and child development, grant in aid for research publications and monitoring. Rajiv Gandhi National Creche Scheme for the children of working mothers, scheme for welfare of working children in need of care and protection, scheme of assistance for the construction or expansion of hostel building for working women with a daycare center, support to training and employment program for women, financial support for rehabilitation of women in difficult circumstances under Swadhar scheme. Next is Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. Assistance to disabled persons for purchase or fitting of aids or appliances, assistance to voluntary organizations for welfare of other backward classes, central sector scheme of free coaching for SC and OBC students, Deen Dayal Disabled Rehabilitation Scheme, grant in aid to voluntary organizations working for SCs, that is scheduled castes, integrated program for older persons, scheme for prevention of alcoholism and substance, that is drugs abuse. Next is Department of Youth Affairs. Under this, National Program for Youth and Adolescent Development. Next is Department of Health and Family Welfare. Under this, Mother NGO Scheme, National Cancer Control Program, National Leprosy Eradication Program, National Mental Health Program, National Program for Control of Blindness, National Tobacco Control Program, Service NGO Scheme. Next is Department of School Education and Literacy. Under this is Inclusive Education for the Disabled Secondary Stage. Innovative and Experimental Education Scheme component under the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. Integrated Education for Disabled Children, Scheme of Support to Voluntary Agencies for Adult Education and Skill Development Scheme. Next is Department of Higher Education. This helps in assistance to agencies for education in human values. Next is National AIDS Control Organization. This provides community care centers, targeted interventions under NACP. Next is Council for Advancement of People's Action and Rural Technology, that is PRUDPart. Under this Advancement of Rural Technology scheme, Gram Shri Mela or Bayasella meet, organization of beneficiaries, public cooperation, workshops or seminars or conferences, YP starter package. Next is Central Social Welfare Board. This provides awareness generation program, condensed courses of education for women, family counseling center, innovative schemes, integrated scheme for women's empowerment, Rajiv Gandhi National Creche Scheme for the children of working mothers, short stay homes for women and girls. The list of NGOs in India is exhaustive. However, we can list few of them such as Samman Foundation, Gunj, Akshaya Trust, Smile Foundation, Udan Foundation, Pratham, Deepalaya, Lepra Society, Helpage India. The Council for Advancement of People's Action and Rural Technology. This was set up as a pioneer organization in September 1986 as a supporting and funding agency for the voluntary organizations by merging two organizations, namely People's Action for Development in India and Council for Advancement of Rural Technology, with the mandate to promote voluntary action and propagate appropriate rural technologies for the benefit of the rural masses. Since then, PRUDPart has been contributing towards the rural development and poverty alleviation through the work of VOs at the grassroots levels and by supplementing government's efforts. The Minister for Rural Development, Government of India, is the President of the Council and also the Chairman of the Executive Committee of the Council. The general body comprises not exceeding 100 members representing voluntary agencies, central and state governments, institutions engaged in activities connected with rural development, rural technology, and individuals possessing experience or expertise relevant to the objectives of PRUDPart. They are nominated by the President of the Council. The Executive Committee of PRUDPart comprises a maximum of 25 members nominated by the President of PRUDPart from amongst the members of the general body. Let us see the mission of PRUDPart. The mission of PRUDPart is to work in close coordination with the rural NGOs and empower them by engaging them in dialogue, respecting their thoughts and ideas, listening to their voice, harnessing their resources, funding their activities, strengthening their hands, particularly the women, the weaker sections of rural society, and the disabled and other underprivileged sections of rural society, walking hand in hand with them on the road to rural prosperity. The main activities of PRUDPart. The main activities of PRUDPart as enshrined in the Memorandum of Association of PRUDPart to encourage, promote and assist voluntary action in the implementation of projects for the enhancement of rural prosperity, to strengthen and promote voluntary efforts in rural development with focus on injecting new technological inputs in this behalf, to act as the national nodal point for coordination of all efforts at generation and dissemination of technologies relevant to rural development, to act as a catalyst for development of technology appropriate for the rural areas by identifying and funding research and development efforts and pilot projects by different agencies and institutions, particularly voluntary organizations. To act as a channel for transfer of appropriate technology to government departments, public sector undertaking, cooperative societies, voluntary agencies and public, to encourage adoption of modern techniques and appropriate technology in rural development. To disseminate knowledge on rural technology to manufacturers of machinery tools, equipment and spare parts, so that large scale production of technically improved machinery etc. is carried out in the private, cooperative and public sectors. To promote, aid, guide, organize, plan, undertake, develop, maintain and coordinate projects or schemes aimed to all round development, creation of employment opportunities, promotion of self-reliance, generation of awareness, organization and improvement in the quality of life of the people in rural areas. To assist and promote programs aimed at conservation of the environment and natural resources. To strengthen existing institutions of research and develop or set up institutions of rural interest are built up. To collaborate with other institutions, associations and societies in India or abroad, including concerned international agencies constituents of the UN system. To conduct or sponsor training programs, conferences, lectures and seminars on rural development activities of particular interest to women, with an accent on improved technologies appropriate to their role in rural development. To conduct or sponsor training programs for trainers, particularly in the voluntary sectors, so that improved technology is disseminated to participants in development in the rural areas. To conduct or sponsor training programs or seminars, workshops and meetings to promote interaction between government agencies and voluntary agencies working in the field of rural development and technology. To carry out research studies, survey and evaluation on the use of appropriate technology and to offer fellowships, scholarships and prizes. To prepare, print and publish papers, periodical monographs and books. To do all other such things as the society may consider necessary, incidental or conducive to the attainment of its objectives. To create awareness amongst rural people and provide a series of escort services to them through the NGOs on matters relating to intellectual property right issues. Next, let us see the programs and schemes funded by PRUDPart. The 6 classified programs and schemes for which PRUDPart assistance will be available are: Natural Resource Development and Management, Rural Industrialization, Income Generation and Market Access, Technologies for Rural Development and Promotion of Information Technology, Rural Infrastructure and Development Scheme, Scheme for Empowerment of Rural Women, SC, ST and disadvantaged groups and for persons with disabilities in rural areas, and Human Resource Development Scheme. The eligibility criteria for NGOs seeking PRUDPart support should have been registered under the Societies Registration Act 1860 or a state amendment thereof, or the Indian Trust Act 1882 or the Religious and Charitable Institutions Registration Act 1920. Should have completed 3 years from the date of registration on the date of application filed with PRUDPart, should have a bank or post office account for the 3 years preceding the date of filing of application to PRUDPart for funding. Rural development should be one of the objectives in the memorandum of association. Should be working with beneficiaries in rural areas even if the NGO's headquarters is located in an urban area. The area of operation must be rural, meaning thereby a village included within the jurisdiction of a Gram Panchayat, areas included within the limits of municipal corporations, municipalities, notified area committees and town panchayats will not be considered as rural areas. Should comply with the requirement of IT department like PAN 12A and 80G, or should have at least applied for the same. The organization should be broad based and representative in character. Composition of office bearers should not be related to each other or within the family or a family affair. Should not have been put on the CAPART's list of organizations to which funding has been suspended for acts of omission and commission. Members of the sanctioning committees of CAPART or their family members and relatives should not be the office bearers of the NGOs which are seeking assistance from CAPART. There should not be more than 3 ongoing projects under implementation by the NGO with funding by CAPART on the date of application filed with CAPART. Any questions?
Yes ma'am, I have a question. Why should a NGO be registered and why can't we do the social service without registration?
When working as an individual for the social service, then registration is not required. But if working as an organization, then certain ethical, social and legal regulations and rules of society has to be followed. To raise funds, get donations, organize and manage programs, and also to get necessary support from the government, certain legal accountabilities and social parameters has to be followed. Hence, for this to have an organization, the first step is to register the organization. Any more doubts? Well then, this is all about NGO. Thank you.